On this week's Quick Tips with Adode Media, I want to talk about a personal brand versus business brand, what the differences are, and the pros and cons so you can decide what's best for you and your business. Oftentimes, as small business owners and entrepreneurs, it's very difficult to understand what is actually that we're supposed to be doing in the world of digital media. From some gurus and individuals indicating that you have to build your business from your personal brand, or others indicating that it should be separate, it's very hard to know which one we should be doing. So let's dive into a few elements. One, let's kind of define this. Your personal brand is you as the individual. So I am Adode. I do have my own individual page. I also have my own individual website, anagogo.com. Now, this allows for me to share behind the scenes of my entrepreneurship journey. My brand, as far as me as the individual, isn't really a brand. It's me and my day-to-day life, my family reunion, what I do for fun, and a lot of just random home decor things because that's what I enjoy. Now, if I decided to utilize my personal page as part of my business, I would need to talk a lot more about what I do in my business because at that point, I'm infusing the two. I'm utilizing it as a way for people to work with me as the individual, and I think that can work in many cases. But it can be a little limiting when it comes to growth. But we'll talk about that when we get over to the pros and cons. So first and foremost, your personal brand is your individual brand identity. It's you and your personal voice, your day-to-day, and it gives that insight. Whereas your business brand allows for you to focus mainly on your business values, your mission, your services, and what you and your team, if you have one, do. Now, I want to add a little caveat. I do find that a business brand allows for you to create from a more holistic standpoint versus focusing so much on what you, the individual, is doing. Next up, a personal brand allows for you to create more connections with your audience. What that looks like is that people feel more endeared to you. And what statistics does show is that more people are purchasing from the individual and the brand because of the fact that they feel connected to you. So if I know that you are a bread maker, there's 50,000 different breads, but I'm going to buy from you because I've become connected to you. I enjoy your story and your background. That's where your personal individualized voice plays in. Now, the connections with an audience, when it is a business brand, it's more so based off of your quality of work, your output. So Adode Media as a page, it's really focused on the work that we do. So we showcase more of the videos that we edit, the content that we create, the websites that we build, because people care about the output and the product in that instance. Whereas on my personal page, I'm talking about my experiences. I'm talking about what my day-to-day is like. And somebody who might like my personality might be more inclined to want to work with my business. You see how it's correlating a little bit more? Next up is flexibility and evolution. I do find that with a business brand, meaning the focus is on the product, the solution, the team, the offer, it does allow for a lot more flexibility and evolution because of the fact that if I am growing and changing and I decide I don't want to talk about this on a day-to-day basis, it kind of keeps you a little bit stuck. Some people will say that your business brand is probably a little harder to evolve because you've kind of developed a persona. But I think when you've developed a persona as an individual, there's this notion of like, wait, this person seems all over the place. Yesterday they were doing this, today they're doing that. Whereas with a business, it's expected for that evolution to take place. And it's also looked at as a good thing. It's looked at as growth versus on the personal side, it can be looked at a little bit more of like instability. You see how it's kind of making a difference from side to side. Next up is scope and reach. Now, I often feel like your personal brand is tied to a specific individual. So it is your expertise, your knowledge base, your influence, your niche. And I honestly think sometimes there can be a little bit of burnout with that because it's solely reliant on you. Now imagine you go from being a solopreneur to hiring a team. It's gone from just being you, but now you're really the one who has to be in front of the camera, creating the content, but you've developed a team. So if you never actually build a brand page, where does your team's content now go? And so I always think of it as thinking of the long term. What is your long-term goals? So let's kind of dive into the pros and cons with that. And I think on the personal brand, The pro is first and foremost, there's that authenticity, that trust, because people are getting to know you as the individual, how you show up, and really becoming endeared to your brand story. In 2024 and beyond, we are seeing where more individuals, more buyers, more consumers care more about the individual brand story because there's so much information and so many people out there. It's hard to know, like, okay, who should I buy from? But if I feel connected to your story, I'm more inclined to. Next up is direct engagement. I think this actually makes a huge difference because if I feel like I reach out and I'm hearing from you individually, I'm going to feel more like endeared. I still do our discovery calls here at Adode Media, and it never fails that when I get on the phone, people are always very surprised that it's me. They're like, oh, I thought I would be talking to somebody else on team. I'm like, no, I'm the person that you're going to be discussing with, and let's kind of like talk through this. There's something that excites them to know that, oh, wait, I still have direct access to the founder. And it's always wild to me because I'm like, the founder? I mean, yes, that's me, but I just work here. And so in essence, when you are building your personal brand, people expect it for it to be you. And as much as that is a pro, it can sometimes be a con. And we'll talk about cons in just a second. It also allows for it to be a lot more specific and niche. So when it's just you, when it's just your personal brand, it's only going to go as far as your individual knowledge base. And that's just the truth of it. So this is why when people see that you've pivoted or you've expanded, it can be very difficult because they're like, wait, these two things don't tie into each other. Versus if you were a business brand, they look at it as oh, you probably hired on more people who are able to support in that capacity. Now let's talk about some of the cons to this. The cons of a personal brand, and I know in 2019 even, and beyond, so many people were like, create your personal brand. That's the only way to sell. Get your face out there. And I've never liked that concept. Each one of my brands has been its own separate thing outside of me because one, burnout is real. And that's the first element. That burnout of having to consistently show up whenever it is you, because now there's this expectation of it being your face. The next piece, or I should say the next con, is limited scaling ability. Let's talk about what I mean by that. When you think of scaling, like I think Beatrice Dixon, who sold Honey Pot, and when she sold Honey Pot for $380 million, that is not her name associated with that. So imagine you have to trademark your name and then you sell your company and your company is named after you, your brand is named after you, and you in essence have to give all of that over. I know for some small business owners, that's not what you envision. But even for myself, I didn't envision that I would have a studio and all of these other elements, but here we are. So you always want to plan for your vision to change. And I think sometimes developing only a personal brand, personal page, personal website with just your face really kind of constricts your ability to scale and exposure. Next up is increased exposure. So I honestly feel like that's a con. I think in the beginning stages, we are very excited as small business owners for that exposure because it's this element of, oh, wait, the work I'm doing is working. People are finding me, finding my business, and they're directed to me. But in moments where you could be burned out, it can then be very difficult to stay back in your business and maybe have an assistant or an associate take over in that capacity. Because then your audience, as well as your clientele, your consumers, they're expecting you. It's you they see all the time. And if you don't really share much about your team, then the expectation becomes, wait, we're such and such. Why aren't they here? Because you've positioned yourself as the expert and not your company and your brand as the expert as a whole. Let's talk about your business brand. So those are the pros and cons for personal brand. Now let's talk about the pros and cons for developing a business brand. First and foremost is my big one is scalability. And so when I talk about, the inability to scale as much on your personal brand, your business brand does allow for that scalability because you're able to bring in other people. So this year, we expanded our services from just podcast production over into a full service creative agency offering things such as marketing, email, newsletters, all of these other elements. Well, my background is in podcast production and podcast marketing and those type of details. To start talking through business marketing and other elements, I had to bring on new people. And so me putting these services out there, it makes it very easy for somebody to say, oh, you have a marketing director. This is what they're responsible for. Versus if you just know me for podcasting, you're like, well, wait a minute. How is she able to talk about anything else, what she's always done as podcasting? And so when you build yourself in a niche as a personal brand and as an individual, having that ability to really change your mind or explore other avenues can be difficult and a little confusing to your audience. The next pro for your business brand is your perception. So having that professionalism, having that setup, is honestly perceived as being more stable. And that's just the truth of the situation. I know I sometimes will look and I'm like, okay, wait, there's these elements, that element about working with an individual. But when I see that there's a team, I see that they have support. That means if you take vacations, I'm still supported. And you may have your own internal processes as a personal brand, but it's hard for people to always do that digging because perception is reality. Next up is longevity and transferability. This ties into the scalability of it, is that you have the ability to pass it down to somebody else. And not saying that if you build a personal brand, that's not the case, but it becomes difficult. If you're building something that you want your children to take over, your grandkids, a legacy for it, if your face is consistently what's in front of the camera, that can be very difficult because let's say your kids aren't very camera happy. What if they don't want to be on camera? What if that's not something that they want to take on? Now, last but not least, let's talk about the cons of a business brand. So from a cons perspective, it can be a little impersonal as far as from a perception. So it's all dependent on, I think, how you infuse it in there. But the personability of like the brand story and getting to see you and know you, the individual, is sometimes removed. Now, there's ways to combat that by creating content and having other elements that showcase your work, your team's work, a little behind the scenes can help with that. But it's still a con. Along with this is higher cost. When you're building a business brand, there's a lot more that goes into that, from newsletters to blogs to email lists to one-pagers, business cards, websites. There's a lot of elements that go behind the scenes, but also on the marketing front, because people have to get to know the brand itself. And you have to figure out how you tell that brand story. And I know for us here at Adode Media, one of the big things that always comes up with clients is, how do I tell my brand story so that this way we stand out from everybody else who's doing the same things? I never call them competitors because of the fact that we're all collaborators. But in a sea of a lot of collaborators, how do you figure out how to stand out? And that's for us where we start, developing a strategy, putting together processes, and all of that costs money when working with a third-party agency. Next up is a risk. So as you expand and grow or change or scale back, there's I'd say sometimes less leeway for brands and businesses than there is for an individual. So on the individual side, you may have a situation to where if you expand or you change your mind or you decide that, you know what, I want to scale back or scale up, there's a slight perception change because people are like, oh, I've always known you for this. But in time, people give you leniency because you're human. But on a business side, whenever you've kind of changed too much, if you diluted or diversified too many things, it can almost give it an ununified brand identity. It can feel like, okay, this is a little disconjointed. And there's, of course, this is why working with an agency like Adode Media, we can help with these type of things. So that this way, when you're moving into a new season, we can help you develop that strategy to really in change management for your audience. So let's quickly recap. I know I just shared a lot of information, but some of the big things that I want to stand out from this is you don't have to do both. You don't have to have a personal brand and a business brand. You can evolve and, make changes as you go. But let's break it down. Your personal brand allows for you to, one, kind of be personable, get in front of your audience yourself, develop that connection, and tell your brand story yourself. Your business brand allows for you to have more flexibility, have more scalability because of the fact that then they're not solely reliant on you. And last but definitely not least, as I kind of wrap this up in the bow of what works best, or what I think makes more sense, is it's okay to change your mind. It's okay to build from one element based off of what you can handle at the time. Trying to manage a personal brand as well as a business brand when you're a solopreneur is just not advisable. So I'd highly recommend that you pick one and you do it really well. You stand out, whether it's a business brand or a personal brand, so that this way your audience knows what to expect and they build that camaraderie with you. In time, you'll be able to establish yourself and grow from there, so that this way, if you decide, hey, I don't want to be the one in front of the camera, I want somebody else to take this on, you're able to do that. So I hope you found this information helpful. And if you're realizing I actually need some help with whether it's developing your personal brand or your business brand, feel free to reach out to us here at Adode Media. We're a full-service creative agency that specializes in helping brands of all sizes with everything from podcast production, branding and design services, email communication, and so much more. And feel free to reach out to us, adodemedia.com. And until next time, you have a good one.